Good morning and welcome to Delicious Art today. So this is our sixth class in our little 6-week course, and it's our final class. So it's been such a great course. I've really enjoyed working with all of you. And it's been wonderful to welcome some new faces and to see some familiar faces. So thank you very much for joining me and continuing with the course. The next one starts in 2 weeks' time, and I know a few of you have already booked in or are going to. So that's exciting. Really looking forward to that. So let's get started on today's class. As you know, this week we celebrated, or didn't celebrate, no, celebrated isn't the right word. We honoured and respected our servicemen and women with Anzac Day on Tuesday. And the symbol for that in Australia here is the poppy. So I thought it might be quite fitting to do a painting of poppies today to finish off our course and to honour those people who served our country and to practice doing some flowers. So this picture is, it's kind of blurred at the background. Then we have a lot of colour here in the foreground. So what I want to do today is focus on getting everything sort of in there without doing too much detail until we get into the beginning of it, or the end of it, I should say, until we get to the end where we need to get all these little bits and pieces in. So we'll be working from the back to the front with today's picture. And I'm just going to welcome Lynn because she's just arrived. Hi, Lynn, welcome. Nice to see you, or not. I can't see your face, but anyway, I know you're here. We're also expecting Susan to pop back in. She dropped off earlier. All right, so let's get started with today's class. The first part of our class is the charcoal drawing. So I've given you a little black and white version of this to look at, and I've also think I've sent it through to you on email so that you can have a look at the tones, because it's really important to understand your tones within your picture. And you can see by looking at the black and white picture, you can see all these tiny little bits of white or highlight that are hitting on the buds and the stems and some of the petals in this picture. So that's going to be fun to do, because we can wait right to the very last when we get everything in to put our little bits of white in there and get those highlights to really sing within the colours of the picture. But first we're going to just do a very quick charcoal drawing of this. There's not a lot of detail that we can actually put in, so there's no fine lines, there's not like a portrait or something with a lot more information in it. It's a little bit looser today, so it shouldn't take too long. So if you want to get yourself a piece of charcoal like this, it's a thin stick, and then maybe a shorter, fatter piece, something like that. Something that's easy to hold on with your fingers and lie flat on your page, because we're going to be using that to be doing a bit of blending and smudging. And then we'll use this one to draw in some lines and work out where everything sits within our page. You'll need your art diary or some drawing paper. So just some plain white paper is perfect for this exercise. And draw yourself up. Here comes Susan. Lovely. Draw yourself up a little rectangle like that to represent size of the painting or the page that you're going to be filling in. So that's the what we call a thumbnail often, and it's the shape of the picture that we're going to paint. Sorry, I sound a bit distracted because I've got some ladies popping in and out. Obviously, internet's not working and things are going on.
I'm
Susan,
back.
lovely,
back.
welcome. Good to have you back. And
Oh my God.
Lynn's here too somewhere. Can't see you, Lynn, but I know you're there. So we will continue on. If you have any questions or need me to slow down or anything like that, please unmute yourself and ask me to do that. I know I do tend to race ahead, and then I don't realise until we get to the end when you haven't caught up with me. So let me know. I'm happy to slow down or wait for you or talk about other things while we catch up with each other. So please don't hesitate to do that. Okay, so what we've done is we've drawn up our thumbnail area, And we're going to do what we always do, which is break down this image into quarters. I find it much easier to break a picture into parts because then we look at it in sections as shapes and tone rather than the whole thing, which can sometimes be a bit confusing. So I'll just move that over a little bit so it can be seen on the screen. We'll focus on the top left corner or quarter for this section. So if you want to cover up the rest of that or just ignore it, then do that. But we're just going to focus on this area here. So I can see that there's a horizon line that runs across the back there. There's a dark area that's probably a row of trees or something. Then there's some grasses, and then there's a light coloured grass and a greener grass. And then we've got the tops of some of the flowers poking through just inside this corner. Hi, Lynn. I hope you're able to stay and things are working for you. So we're just starting here in this top left-hand corner. And first you want to draw up or rule up your grid lines. So if you get a ruler or do it freehand, whatever works for you. So I'll be good today and use a ruler. And just find your path. You're here?
Sorry, I'm here, but it's just been really hassling. So I've joined through browser, but my picture's not there, but that's fine.
That's fine. You can see what's going on.
I'm hoping it won't bomb out on me.
All right, no worries. Yeah. Okay, good to know you're here.
I'm here in the dark, but I'm here.
Well, that's good. Just as long as it's not dark at your end so you can see what you're doing.
I can.
All right, perfect. Okay, thanks, Lynn. We'll carry on.
Okay.
And as I mentioned, if you do need to ask any questions or get me to slow down, then I'm happy to do that. So looking at this top right-hand corner, I can see that the horizon starts at about that point there. So where does it intersect with these lines? That's the thing we're looking for. And then where does it intersect as it comes off the page over here on the left-hand side? It dips down a little bit. There's a slight little sort of a hill, not a very obvious hill, but it's got a slight little dip there. That just makes the horizon a tiny bit more interesting rather than just having a straight line all the way across. And then we've got the row of sort of yellow coloured grasses, which kind of runs around about there. And then we've got some greener grass that comes down through here. And then we've got poppies, okay? So we just want to mark these things in softly. And we can now look at the shapes of the flowers. So you can see there's this little red one here. It intersects this line. The rest of it comes over onto the other side. We'll just look at this side for now. So we can see that that intersects at about where that horizon line intersects as well. So we can come down and we can then look at where it intersects below that. So this is a little red one that's sitting on top of these guys. Might be a bit difficult to see. If you've got your picture in front of you on a screen or a phone, then you should be able to zoom in and get a closer look at that. But that flower is sort of there, and there's another one behind it. So we can see that the bottom of the flower intersects about here, the top intersects about there. So we can sort of just draw in loosely that little shape of the flower. It's got a little dark center here. So just darken that off for now in a circular shape, okay? And then we've got the stem that comes down in this beautiful arc like that. And then behind that flower, there's another red blob, basically. So everything is a shape. Don't worry that it doesn't look like a flower. If you just draw the shapes that you see, it'll all come together in the end. It always does. So we've got this interesting little shape underneath the first flower, and it kind of comes down here like this. And then we've got a little green stem that wanders down through there as well. And there's red down in here. Okay. So like I said, there's not a lot of definition in this until we get right to the front of the picture. So we're just doing it all in sort of blurry shapes at the moment. Then we'll move across and you can see there's a purple flower right in the middle of here. So it's about there. Just draw a little bit of a purple shape like that. Don't worry about all the detail, the petals and things. Because it's far away, we can't see all that detail unless you've got binoculars or good eyes. So we'll just make that a blurry little shape, and it's got a dark center. What we're looking at is the darks, okay? A bit hard to see on that little black and white picture. Then we've come down and we've sort of got these soft red and purple shapes wandering around in here. There's a few little buds that, or shapes of buds that come up through there. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 little buds there. So you just draw those little round shapes or roundish shapes there, and some stems that come down from them. Then we've got this red mass here as well. So you can see there's a red shape coming through here. It sort of starts behind the buds, across in front of that little middle flower, the purplish one, and down through here. Do just soft little wiggly lines. The outlines of these petals are sort of wiggly. They're not a sharp straight line. And then we've got a little shape that comes around there. We've got another little bud shape that comes up here. So you can see how it's kind of very vague, isn't it? All of this. So we don't want to get too caught up in the detail. They're the main things or elements that are sitting inside this top quarter. I know there's bits and bobs in the background, but we can blur them in later. And then we've got this tall bud here. So there's a little bud in the middle that sits next to the purple flower. It's in the foreground. So it's going to have more detail, but just make a little dark shape there and then draw the little stem down. You can see in the picture, all the stems have hairs on them. They look like they're little hairs and they catch the light. So that'll be fun to do later. All right. So that's basically all we need to get into that area there. Most of this will be about shading and tone when we get to doing it with the thick bit of charcoal at the end. So let's move over into the right-hand quarter. So you can see the horizon sort of flattens out and it comes off the page at about there. So by horizon, I mean that dark area of the top of the picture. Then we've got the yellowish coloured grass there. It's also fairly straight across this side and then it dips down a little bit as it goes over to the left. Then we've got green. And then we can just look at all the other shapes through here. So you can see we'll continue this red poppy through this area here. So it comes down and joins up with that there. Little interesting little shapes, poppies. They're so complicated sometimes. So we can continue to finish that off. So he's done. Then we've got the other one underneath and you can see that's got a lovely V shape. See that V shape there? So that's a really good thing to look out for, is your negative space. So we've got this little V here. So look for your negative space. If you're having trouble finding the shape of the petal or the thing that you're doing, look at the space around it, and often that will help you get things in the right place. And then behind all of that, we've got this blurry purple area there. We've got a bit of red across the back. And on top of the red, there's a few more purple flowers coming around like that. So just mark those in lightly like this. We've got the top of a red poppy popping through the top here. And it intersects at about, not quite halfway across, but a little jagged edge on that one too. Behind that one and in front of the purple, we've got these 3 little buds that are poking up. So you can just indicate those with the little black blobs, little dots like that. There's another one that's popped up on the other side of the flower there. So it's a little bud too. Lots of buds in this one. So we'll create a little process for doing those and just noticing where the light catches on those. So we've got the light catching on the top of all of these little buds. It looks to me like the light is coming from the top left. So if you think about the sun's coming down this way, it's going to be catching light on the top of all the bits and bobs that are poking out. And then on the left-hand side of the stems, you can see there's light on those. It's actually a bit easier to see on the black and white version. because it's quite prominent on there. You can see on there also that most of these flowers we're doing, the purples and the reds, are the same tone, aren't they? So there's not a lot of difference between the purples and the reds in the black and white version. And if you have that on the screen as well, it's much easier to see. It's a bit hard on this small version. But if you look at that, you can see there's only a few variation in tone throughout all the purples and the reds. They're a very similar tone. So that's a good thing to know when we move forward. And obviously it's blending into the green background, which is also a similar tone. Okay, so our tones all throughout this are quite mid-tone, and then we've got the bright brights with the lights catching on bits and pieces, and we've got the dark darks on the shadow side of things. So it's quite an interesting picture to look at and to figure out what colours to use when we move forward. Anyway, carrying on, just a bit of a blur of petals and things through here. So just keep all your lines quite soft. Again, just a nice range of shapes and not too much difference in tone. So you can see I've darkened off the darkest parts that I can kind of see as we put this in. So again, looking at the tones, looking for the darks and the lights, and then everything else is a mid. Okay. Center of those little purple flowers seems to be a little bit darker. And then we come across to the right side and you can see we've got this blurry purple and red stuff happening in here. There's a few little strands of green grasses or buds growing up, but we've also got a couple of tall green grasses sort of coming across the top here and interrupting that back area, which is quite nice. That makes your painting a bit more interesting if you interrupt some lines. So you can draw those in there up the top. And just looking back over on the other side, there's another one wafting around at the back there too. There's also trees. I know we haven't put them in, but you can see in the background up at the very top there, it's quite dark. And then there's a little bit of shading for trees. So we'll do that with the short fat piece. So we'll move down into the bottom right-hand corner. So we're going clockwise around our page. There's a lot of information in here. We just want to find the main shapes. All right, so we're going to continue this red flower down. There's another little red one there. So just looking at the biggest main shapes through here. Everything else is kind of blurred, soft, and not very obvious or defined. So just looking at our reds first, maybe. There's a lot of purple in the background as well, with some lovely red petals. So got all these shapes of petals, and it's really just a burst of colour through there. So just lightly sketching in all those shapes. I've done this area here. Moving across the page, I've got a nice little red one here that goes off the edge. There's another one there that comes off from the top quarter. Then we've got some more red down through here and through here. So literally just blurry shapes of red. Okay, and then all the rest of it is green and purple. So just putting some of those red shapes in there like that. Very soft, very blurred, nothing very defined. And then we can look at some of the purple shapes. So there's some little dark areas where the center of the flowers are. And again, just making that quite soft and blurred. And then in the foreground, we've got a couple of flowers as well that sort of just sit behind. Most of this grass is in the foreground. So we can start to just draw the lines of the grass up through in front of those flowers like this. Okay, and they sort of come up. We've got tall ones and short ones. Some are bending over. You've got to make sure when you're doing this sort of thing that they're not all the same. They don't all go in the same direction. They crisscross each other. And because this is a poppy field, then we've got all these beautiful soft poppy shaped stems and buds coming up through there. And there's a fair bit of dark, a bit of dark in the buds as you see them in the background. And again, you can find those if you look at your black and white version. Okay, so just drawing them in, a little bit of variation in the tones, and that'll do for that section. What we're going to do is shade most of this, and then we'll get on to the colour version. Okay, so then we'll move over to this side. If we break up, just look at this bottom left quarter. You can see that these flowers from the first quarter we started in come down into there, so that continues on. We've got a bit of a red shape down through here. And then we've just got, looking at the red flowers only at the moment, we've just got a little bit of red shape that comes around through here. Like that. And that's about all the red that's in that section. Then we've got a fair bit of purple, some in the foreground, most of it's off in the distance. And again, we can just draw some little flowery shapes like this to indicate the purples. These will all just be smudges and blurs when we do it in the colour. And then coming down into the foreground, we've got a couple of bigger purple flowers there, but again, they're not very definite. So maybe the photographer has blurred everything and just focused on the buds and the grasses to make those more prominent or to stand out more. And also because they're in the front, but these ones down here are slightly blurred. Anyway, so that's about all we've got in the way of flowers in that section. The rest of this quarter is mostly grass. So there's a fair bit of grass in the bottom right section, and it comes up in front of these beautiful poppies. And remember, we've got to put some stems on some of those too. So, and the stems often have a beautiful little wave or a wiggle in them. So they're a beautiful shape. They're never perfectly straight, usually. Well, don't say never, but they're not often straight. They're usually got a bit of a bend or a curve. So they're quite lovely and elegant looking. So just putting some of your lines in through there and noticing there's this lovely tall one that we started in the first quarter, and it comes all the way down here. So we can put more definition onto some of those stems and buds that are sitting in the foreground. And again, I'm just going to mark some of the little buds in with a dark blob or shape. And again, remember, they're not all the same shape either. They the blobs are similar shapes, but they've all got, light catching in different spots. We won't bother too much with trying to get the light in here because it'll be here forever and a day. But we just want to get a bit of an idea of the whole layout of this picture. So doing this in your charcoal is a really good way to rehearse your picture and just get an idea of, what the tones are, what the composition is. And you might look at this and think, I think I want to add, something else. I want to put a tree in the background that's more visible or something like that. You've got the license to do that because this is your art. And I'm finding, even with my own art, as I'm becoming more confident, I'm actually adjusting things to suit what I want to put in. And often it is just adding a tree or removing one or moving something to the side. If something's bang smack in the middle of the picture, it's not always good to have things right in the middle unless it's your main focus. So if you had a tree right there in line with this poppy, it'd look a bit weird. So I would put it over there somewhere and move it across. All right, so now we're going to grab our short, fat piece of charcoal and just focus on the tones, okay? So this is where we take a really good look at our black and white version. And as we said, it's really dark at the top here, which is what's going to make all the other things in the foreground brighter. You always need to have darks to make lights. So we're going to darken that off. Just rub that nice and firm across your page. Depending on what kind of charcoal you've got, this willow charcoal is quite soft, but it's easy to take off as well. If I put my finger in there, I can easily take that off and get a lighter tone. And then we'll look at this yellow stripe of grass across the back here. Now that's a lighter tone slightly lighter tone than the greens that we're going to do as we come forward. So keep that in mind. You might want to soften that off with your fingers just to make that a slightly lighter tone. And then as we come down across here, we're getting into some darker green. Not really dark, but it's definitely a little bit deeper than that yellow. Okay. And then we're sort of just going to block in around it, just darken off all this stuff in the front. This is all mid-tone through here, except for the very dark areas and the very light areas. So it's going to be a bit of a challenge getting everything to sit apart from each other if you want to make that happen with your flowers, but we'll do it with tone and colour. So just all through here is a mid-tone, and then you can kind of focus a little bit more on some of the flowers. So you might want to darken that off. I know they're not darker in the picture, but we'll do it for the sake of the exercise, just so we're getting familiar with where everything sits. Okay, so just sort of indicate where your flowers might be. This is a very soft, sort of vague beginning to our class. So just notice now, if you look at your black and white version, I've got it blown up quite big on my other screen. So I can see that this flower here has quite a dark shadow underneath it. So it's things like that that will bring your flowers forward, because then we can add the mid-tones to the rest of it and just a few little shadows and shades that will bring it to life and make it sort of pop out a little bit more. So there's some really lovely darker tones in the reds through here. There's another one there in the middle. This poppy up here, here's a mid-tone, but the middle of it is quite dark. And there's some lovely shadow under some of the petals there. So we can focus on those things as we move forward into the colour version. I don't want to spend too much time on here, otherwise we won't get finished. And again, just noticing some of the stems that have a bit more dark on them and the buds. So there's a few little quite dark areas through here. So it's all sort of mid-tone, and then we can focus on getting some of the darks, especially down here in the front. You want the dark shadows on the right-hand side of all those stems and buds, and then we get light on the other sides. Okay, so I don't want to spend too much time on this. We might get cracking in a second, move on to the colour version, but this was just to really think about the tones, how this is going to work, what we're going to do. Like you need to plan ahead with pastels, and you always got to do your background first. It's so much easier. And most of this will feel like background because we'll be blurring a lot of it, and then we'll just refine some of it towards the end when we want to put the detail into the things that are in the foreground, like all these little buds and some of the what do you call those? Stems. Okay. So I know that doesn't look terribly wonderful, that picture, but it just gives us an idea of where things are. If you want to also just have a look at the background there, there's a few little trees suggested in the background, so you can get your eraser if you want to and just sort of lighten up a little bit of that to suggest some foliage through there. So just a few little loose shapes through there. Again, you'll have to knead your eraser because it gets really dirty when it picks up the charcoal. Put your grasses back in here over on the side that we covered up. So the eraser is great with charcoal because it'll put the light back in. If you want to get fussy, or even if you wanted to paint the whole thing in charcoal, then you could use your eraser to get some light into some of these spots where the light's really catching on, mostly on the buds, not so much on the petals. Okay, so that's a bit rough and ready, but we'll move on and get stuck into colour. So we'll pop that one aside for now. And I like keeping all my things in an art diary like this because it just means that I can look back at what we did and, you know, things like that. It's just nice to have it all in one place, and it's also a lot easier and cleaner. So in our notes today, I have said that paper color would be great if it was green, red, or a neutral grey or purple tone. Really doesn't matter. Even if you wanted to use black, that would be kind of good. So I've got this green, I've got lots of paper, and I've just realised too that they're not actually selling these in sheets anymore. So you can only buy them in pads. I think they're pads of 10 sheets, or yeah, I'm not sure, but and they have a warm or a cool pad. So yeah, it's interesting, and they work out a bit more expensive, which is a shame, because these were great to be able to just buy individually. You know, you could get 2 of those and 1 of that and so forth. But anyway, that's progress. So I've chosen this green one. You can choose whatever you want, really. Make sure you tape your paper down onto your board just so that it won't move. It stays nice and still. You don't need to hold it all the time, because there's nothing worse than having to hold something down while you're trying to work on it. I just do it on the corners because I want to get it off easily. Be careful with the tape too. Sometimes it will tear, and often it's good if you tear a piece off, rub it or stick it onto your jeans or cloth or something first. That just removes a little bit of the adhesive and stops it from possibly tearing later on. So I've just done my corners like that, and I'm going to rule up my page first. So let's do that. Use a piece of charcoal or a pastel pencil. I'm going to go with black charcoal for today, because I know that A, I can get it off really easily, and B, it's all going to be blended in anyway. And I always put a little mark, or try to remember to put a little mark outside in my margins, so that if I do cover up my grid marks, I'll be able to remember where they were if I want to place something and I can't quite see where it needs to sit in my picture. Even though we draw it in, sometimes we lose it because we fill up something and we cover up, you know, one of the flowers, and then you might think, well, where was that? If you have your little marks on your margin like that, you'll be able to figure it out later. Okay, so that's in charcoal. And I'm going to, do I need charcoal? No, I probably don't need it anymore, so I'll put that over there. Now, these are the colours that I've chosen for today. Just going to get a bit of paper so I can talk about those for a second. This is also good for art diaries because I can tear out a bit of paper and use it for my colour swatches. All right, so these are kind of in order from dark to light. I've got my blue violet, which you probably know by now is my favourite dark. So it's wonderful for using for your shadows and your darkest. I've got a very dark green. It's called phthalo green, or something similar to that. It's a lovely dark green, so that's going to come in handy for my shadows. Now, green is a colour that you need lots of if you're going to do landscapes and things like this. And you never seem to have the right greens. So I always have 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 or 7 greens. So I've got that green, which is like a khaki green. Then I picked up this one, which is more like a limey green. Might have to find a more yellowy one too, I'm just realising. I'll leave a gap for that. And then I've got this pale green, which might work for some of the highlights on some of the stems and buds instead of white to start with. And then we can always work up to the lighter colours if we need to. So they're my greens. I'm just going to grab something that's a bit more yellowy green. See what I've got. You might not have a lot of greens, so you'll just have to try and, that's very similar to that, isn't it? Yeah. Oh, well, I'll put that in there. Now, when you're looking at your colours, I've just done this swatch here. If I squint through my eyelashes, I can see that my darkest ones are here, and these ones all look like a mid-tone to me. So that's what I'm looking for. I want to try and keep these in a bit of a mid-tone range because most of this picture is in mid-tones. Okay, so they're my greens. Then I've got some purples because we've got purple poppies or flowers as well. So I've got a darkish purple for the middle of my flowers, and I'll also be able to use my blue violet. Then I've got another purple which doesn't look that different on here. I thought they were different. They look really different in here, but when I put them there, they look pretty much the same. Isn't that interesting? Oh well, maybe I need a lighter purple. I'll go have a look. Okay, let's see what this one does. That's better. So a lilac kind of color instead of that. And I picked up a pink. I'm not sure whether I'll use that or not, but that might come in handy for some of the highlights on the purple flowers. And then the reds, of course. So red is also a tricky color. It's hard to get a really good red. This is an orangey color. It's a horrible pastel. That's so hard. Yuck, I'm going to find a better one. What's that one like? That's better. So that's sort of an orangey red, that one. And then I've got a bluey red. It's also horrible. It's quite hard. There we go. That's better. Sometimes you've got to turn them around and find a softer side. So there are two reds there. And I'll probably also use some of the purples and the blue violet in those reds to get a little bit of tone going on. And then I've got lights. So I've got a creamy colour, which is quite nice. And I'll use that before I go to white. Okay, so remember, I like to save white for last. I've got a white there, but I'll go to other lights first. I'll go to my pink and my cream and my pale green before I go to white, because I just want to, as I said, save the light for last. You can't get any lighter than white, so I'll keep that for the end. So that's pretty much my palette. And we might need to add more or change things. We'll see how we go. But that's where it is at this stage. So we might take a little break, just 5 minutes, and then we'll come back and get stuck into it. We're running a little bit ahead of time, which is great. So we'll have plenty of time to work on this one. So I shall see you back here in, what is it, 9:41? Say 9:50, make it 9 minutes. All right, I'll see you soon. Okay, welcome back. We're going to get started now. So I'll just pop my little colour palette aside. I like to keep my pastels that I pick for each picture in a separate container, because that way you can come back later and you'll know which ones you use. So it's a nice way to make sure that you don't get confused with your colours and lose them. All right. So we know that in this picture we have a dark area across the back. So basically we've got kind of stripes really, haven't we? So what we're going to do is just block in all that background stuff. So we're going to start with blocking in this dark area up here. I'm going to use dark green and maybe some blue violet. Then we'll use our lighter yellowy green, and then we'll come down into here and we'll sort of block in the colours we can see. Okay, so what we're going to do now is try to change our brain to just see shapes and colours and put them in, and not the detail. We'll keep the detail for last. So the best way to work with pastels is to do your background first and then work forward so that you get all the stuff done behind the main characters, and then we look at them at the end. So we're going to do that without doing too much looking into each quarter this time. We're going to treat this as a whole. So it's a little bit of a different process to what we've been doing in other classes. Let's have a go. So grab your darkest green, and if you've got a long stick, you might want to break it, because it's easier just to lie it flat on your paper like this and pull it across. So I'm going to start over on the right side and just pull my dark green across at about where I can see that dark stripe or area at the back of my picture. Okay, and then we dip it down a little bit on that left side. See how it sort of dips down slightly, so it's not a straight line. If you prefer a straight line, you can do that. So this is where you get to choose what you want to do. So I've got some really dark green there. Now I'm just looking at the color version. So I don't know if you can see it on yours, but there's a couple of darker bits probably across the bottom of it. So I'm just going to get my blue violet, which is my darkest, and sort of smush that around a little bit just to create a bit of variation in my darks throughout that area. Okay. Now I forgot to get a towel for my hands, so I'll just go grab one. If you have a little towel and wet it on one end, then that'll be good because you can clean your fingers. Especially starting with a dark color, and when we move up into the lighter colors, we're going to want to have clean fingers to push the light colors around and not get those dark tones into them. So I've just got a little cloth wet on one end so I can clean my fingers in between and dry on the other. Old towels are great for this. I just cut them up and use them in little towels. All right, so I've got your darks on there. Let's just push this in now into the paper. What we want to do is get the paper to grip it and push it in. So I'm pulling it crossways just because that's the way that the back part looks to me. It's sort of wide and dark. Okay, gorgeous. That's beautiful and dark. I'm really liking what happened there. So you can see I've got quite dirty fingers, and I can wipe them off on my towel and hopefully make them slightly cleaner for the next round. All right. So I'm going to tip off my dust. You can see I've got a bit of dust that's gathered here on the page, and I have to tip it off because I'm working flat today. And so it sits on the page. It doesn't drop down like it would if I was on an easel. Easels are better, I find, for pastel work, but for this classes, I just find it's easier to sit at my desk and do it. All right, so I've got this lovely dark stripe across the back. That's quite beautiful and dramatic. Before we move on, though, we need to put a little bit of green smooshy stuff through here, just to indicate softly, lightly, not too definitely, but that there's a kind of a trees, forest or something back there. So I just used my this green, which is pretty much the same color as my paper. So it's probably my second darkest green. I don't want it to be bright because it'll stand out too much on the darks there. But I just wanted to get a bit of a blurry, soft suggestion of trees in the background. And I think that works quite well on there with the dark behind it. And then you can see there's a few like little soft tree trunks. I'm going to try this pinky color and see what that does, just to get a little bit of a very soft. I'm just using it on its side and just lightly putting some marks on there with the side of my pastel, something like that. Now that is too light, so I'm going to have to push it in. That's okay, we can do that. So to push it in, I'm just going to dab it softly and blur it off a little bit so that it disappears into the background a bit more. See how that's gone away into the background now? So sometimes if you do put a color or something down that looks too light to you, if you push it in, you'll make mud, okay? And mud is a good thing. Often it's a good thing. Sometimes it's not so great. See how that's now starting to look like trees in the background? Because the darks that we put down first are helping to create some shadow and tone, and then just dabbing in this little bit of pale pink or whatever you might use. You could use a pale green, or it looks like tree trunks, so you could have a browny color, whatever you want really. I just picked green up, that one up because it looked about the right tone. Probably too bright, but anyway, doesn't matter. Now I've pushed it in, it doesn't matter. So I'm just going to get this green again and zhoosh a bit of that slightly over some of those little marks that we just put in. just to indicate leaves in front of branches or tree trunks. And see, that looks quite soft and lovely. So when things are off in the distance like that, you really don't need to put a lot of detail in. You can just put shapes in that suggest things, and often it's just a blurry kind of smudge of colour. So that's looking all right. Quite happy with how that works. I just realised there's another bit of greenery or something here. So you can juice that along as wherever you like. Just try not to put too much down, because if you do, it can kind of take over and you won't get that beautiful dark showing through. So just keeping it nice and soft and blurred. And when you blur it, like if I don't want to push it in too much to the paper, I'll just dab it with my finger like this, and that kind of just pushes it in. And it also mixes with the colour that's underneath it, so you start to create those beautiful subtle shadows and tones. Loving that. So I've got a bit more dust on there. You can see when I tip my paper up, the dust drops and it catches on the paper, because this is the scratchy colour fix paper. You hear that sound? Some people hate it. You'll find when you tip your dust off, or even if you're on an easel, as your dust drops, it'll land on the paper and kind of catch on it because it is so gritty. Now, that's another reason to start from the top and work down, especially when you're on an easel, because as you work down, you can get rid of all this as you come down and blend it all into whatever you're doing. So that's another reason to do that. And obviously, because I'm tipping it up, see how it's all landing back on that page. I'm not worried about it. I'm just going to push that in. So I'm not concerned at all. All right, now let's have a look at this colour here. So I picked up this yellowy greeny colour. I tried to match things by holding the pastel over the picture like that to see if I've got the right colour and tone. And if I squint through my eyelashes, I can see that it's about the right tone. So that's going to be a good greeny yellow colour to put in this area here. And you can see that the line between the dark background, it's got all crumby one, and this colour is blurred. So it's not a hard straight line. So we can blur where they join. And again, see, I'm just putting this on nice and softly, softly, like that. Just pushing it across there like that. I'm going to pull it down a little bit lower because I'm going to overlap with the next green as I come forward. So just pushing that down a little bit lower and meeting the edge of the dark background so that we're joining those together. And then when we run our fingers across, we'll be able to kind of blur the lines where they meet. So if you've got enough of that on your page, just grab a finger and make sure it's reasonably clean. And we can pull it across like this. I'm just doing little sideways movements with my finger, and pulling it like this, left, right, across there. Because again, this is soft and blurred and it's off in the distance, so we can't really see any detail. We just know that it's a lighter bit of grass, or maybe it's some sort of crop, I don't know. I'm just going to go up and down, just these little up and down movements now to sort of soften off the edge where it meets the dark area and make it look like maybe it is some grass. So it can't all be completely straight, can it? So we just give it a little sort of soft edge, and that'll help to create the feeling that there's a crop of something or grasses or whatever running across there. Okay, so it's kind of just a soft, blurred joining between these two. Again, it's off in the distance. I'm going to tip my dust off again. Okay, so that's looking all right. And then we can move down into the next colour, which is your green. So your main green, I think, will be this one. I'm going to see what that does. I don't know, it might be too dark. Let me see. This is where you get to test things and see. That's a bit too bright. That's a bit too dark. So now I need to go find another grassy green. I picked up the wrong one, obviously, or maybe I just forgot to get that one. Okay, so I think this one might work. It's kind of more grassy than the other two. It's a new stick. I'm not sure what brand that is. It's got no labels. So I'll just have to break a bit off like that size. Put the rest aside. So this is why we need to have a separate palette, because you can, as you go, you think, no, I need something else for that. Okay, let's see what happens. This is better. It's a better green. Okay. Now, because I've got those other two colours under that already, that's kind of cool because I can sort of now mix them all around a little bit just to create some variation in my tone. So I'm just going to pull this green across here like this. Across the back there where we can see it, it joins up with this yellowy colour. And then if you look around your picture, I want you to really focus on where the greenest areas are. Now break it down into shapes or colour. So we've got a green strip across here. Then we sort of move down into a lot of purple and red in this next area, which is above our halfway mark. So we've got a lot of purple and red through there. I'm just looking at the background now. Don't worry about what everything is. We're just looking at the blocks of colour. Then we come down and we've still got quite a lot of red and purple through here under the centre line. But if you look down here on this left-hand corner, there's quite a big area of green through there. And there's another area on the bottom of that section here, on the bottom left quarter, next to the halfway line at the base. And it comes across to here, and there's another green part there. So what I'm doing is I'm breaking this picture up into sections. Okay, so I'll show you what I'm talking about. There's green across the back here. And then I can see on this side here, we've got a fair bit of green. Now we will be putting purple and things over the top of this as we move on. But this is predominantly sort of green, this area here. And then across here on the bottom is also mostly green. So I'm just blocking in. This is called blocking in. And this is what you do when you want to fill up your paper and your background before you start putting in the detail. And there's another patch of green through here. There's a little bit down there, but there's a patch through there. See that? So that's predominantly where the biggest green blocks of colour are. Okay. So let's push that in. Come back up to this top section and just push that in. Just going to run across ways first because I want to blur that into the yellow colour. Okay, again, this is nature, so there's not many straight lines. I won't say no straight lines, but it's everything's soft in the background here and blurry. So we'll just sort of merge those two greens together nicely like that. And then just come to where you've put your greens and we'll just push it into the paper. So we want to get all the background stuff pushed in so then we can come back and build on top of it. And now I'm coming down here. Now, as I'm coming down the front here, I'm going up and down instead of crossways. Why? Because everything's growing in a vertical position from the front here. At the back, it's more horizontal because it's further away, right? And we can get away with it because we don't need to put bits of grass and all the detail in there. But at the front, everything goes up and down because of the direction that things are growing. Okay, so I'm just going to keep going up and down. I'm using 3 fingers. I'm keeping my fingers flat on the paper and I'm literally just rubbing them across like this without lifting off. That way you get a lovely continuous kind of blend as you move across your page. Okay, and you're not sort of lifting off and on all the time. If you keep picking your finger up and doing this, you start creating patterns and everything starts to look the same and it doesn't all look cohesive and join in nicely. So just get your fingers in there and give it a jolly good rub up and down to indicate the direction of the stems that are going to grow there. All right, and I'll just push this into back there. Probably didn't need as much green on that bit, but anyway. Now, as I mentioned before, I put those other colours down over here just to test them earlier, but I quite like what that's done with the the other green. So it's basically 3 greens together. So what I'm going to do now, pick up this darker green, not my darkest, but I'm just going to zhoosh a bit of that around, because this is going to help to create some variation in the tone. What we're trying to do is think about tone and creating depth. So to do that, you need to focus on your darks and your mids and your lights and so forth. So if I put some of the darker green on here like this, and I've pulled it in the up and down direction, and I've pushed it in the sideways direction here, and just push it in. Doesn't all have to be exactly the same green, but we're just creating a bit of a variation of greens through there. Just makes it a bit more interesting, I think. So if you just have one flat color, it doesn't look as vibrant and alive as if you have, 2 or 3 tones of the same color. So see how that's now starting already to look like it's got some depth. Just pulling that through, again, running up and down. It doesn't matter if you blur it too much or go in the wrong spot. We can come over it later. Just going to tip off my dust again. Go. So you can see how that's all starting to come together and create a really nice background to begin working on. I'm just sipping my coffee. If your grid lines are bothering you, you can take them out with your eraser. They're pretty easy to cover up, but if you feel like, you want to get rid of it, then by all means do that. Just make note of your marks on your margin. If they've been lost, mine always get lost because I tend to blur them when I'm rubbing things in. That way we can find it again if we need to later. Okay, so now let's look at this picture again. Can you see behind this purple mass here, which is more in the foreground, there's a little bit of red behind there and behind here. So there's almost, if you look beyond the flowers, it's hard to do sometimes, but if you try to look beyond all these flowers and into the background, there's a blurred red area back there. Now, I've just got to tell you, I've never painted this before, so we're in this together. We're figuring it out together. I can see a blurred red area behind all of that. So I'm going to put a bit of red in there to blur that off, and then we can build on top of it. So it's a warm red, so that's my orangey red that I've picked out. And I just want to zhoosh a bit of that across through here. Red and green together are just glorious. But if you look at that in black and white, you can't find the difference because they're the same tone. And that's why a lot of people who are colorblind can't see red and green traffic lights, because they're the same tone. Okay. So just zhooshing a bit of red through there to suggest that there's a field of poppies and they go way back over there, but we can't see them all individually. And again, I'm just going to push this in softly. So I haven't put too much down. I don't want to put a very thick layer down because sometimes if you do that, it's hard to get more pastel over the top of it. So I just want to do a gentle, soft little layer there. If you need to add more, feel free to do that. If you find it's maybe too red or something, you can put a bit of green over the top. That'll make mud, but it's quite a lovely mud, quite a nice kind of feeling. So it's just a blurry, soft bit of red, smushy tones back there. Okay, so that's the background. We're looking beyond all the flowers, just looking at blobs of colour. Now, let's look at purple. So I want to pick up my mid purple, I think. Yes, so again, I'm just checking that against my purple picture. And I can see that that's the right tone. There is darker purple in the center of some of these flowers, and we'll do that after. But I just want to use this purple as my main purple to block in those little purple spots. Okay, so if you grab that, we've got some purple here. So just zhooshing a bit of purple around here. This is where we start to get just really breaking everything down into color codes, all right? So just putting a bit of purple and over the green areas too, where we've come up beyond where it's only green, because we've got to get the purple on top of it. There's some purple down through this bit here, bit there. So just blurring this off softly, softly, marking in where just larger sort of areas of color. So we're just keeping it nice and loose for now. And as we work upwards or towards the detail, that's when we start to focus on getting more detail in there. All right, so we've got some purple in there. Now I'm going to add a bit of red. All right, so I haven't blended it yet. I want to get some of this on first, so then we can start to push it around together. Just noticing where the red areas are. So we've got a lovely big red section here. Literally just putting blobs of red. What we're doing is creating a background to build on. So we need to get some red down here so we can add more over the top of it to get those flowers more defined as we come forward. Okay, we've got some red here. Down through here. Short stumpy pieces of pastel is best, because that way you can lie it flat on the page and get a nice wide mark. It's much easier to do that than using the end or the tip of your pastel. We save the ends and tips for getting all the detail in there, like all the stems and things. We'll be using the edges and tips for that. So again, just looking at where all the red parts are. Okay, and then we've got to kind of go, okay, so what's here? Well, there's a bit of everything in there. Not so much red, but definitely some more purple. So kind of just breaking it down into sections and noticing how much color is in each spot, like what's the dominant color in each area. So see if you can make your brain do that. It's a bit hard sometimes to get it to do that. For the individual flowers, there's a couple of purple ones sitting up the back there. We can do something like this. I'll just show you. There's one there that's sort of, you can sort of see more detail of it, but not greatly. So if I just draw in some petals like that, little blobs like that for petals, and then we'll do this in more detail afterwards with the others, but I'll just show you. And then a bit of dark purple through there, and then just smush it with your finger a little bit, and that'll just sort of turn into a flower later on after we put all the other bits and bobs in there. But it's kind of sitting out by itself, isn't it? And it's got a little bit of a stem that goes up to it behind there. So I can use my dark green or darker green for that. And if the stem or the center of it isn't quite dark enough, I can go a bit darker with my blue violet. So that's the kind of thing we'll be doing as we work towards the front. There's not many purple flowers. Well, there are a lot of purple flowers, but there's not many with that much information in them. Okay, so now we've got all of that kind of pushed in and smudged in. What we need to do is just get it pushed in again to the paper so that we can build on it. Okay, so we're just going to build on it. Now, this time when you're rubbing it in, look at the shape of the flowers or the petals and kind of try to rub it in the shape of whatever it is it is, so that you're not doing big wide marks. We're just doing soft, small marks to sort of indicate the little flowers and bits and pieces through there. You can see as I'm pushing it in, it's getting a lot more muted. The colours are not as bright once they're pushed into the paper. That's okay, because now, once that's all done, we can come back over the top and get some really bright, beautiful colours in there. So just again, pushing in, rubbing your finger in the direction of the flowers, or just doing soft little sort of squiggly marks and trying to change the way you rub your finger. So up and down and across and little squiggly shapes. Try to vary that a little bit. So see how that's all blurred now. I haven't cleaned my finger off. I just keep putting purple in red and red in purple, but I'm not too worried about that. The main goal is to get enough pastel on the page that we can start to build on top of it and focus more on the detail. You need to have something on the page to work with. So this is just getting that happening so that we can then start adding over the top. It's like laying the foundations. It doesn't look like anything much at the moment, but we'll get there. So I think the next stage, after we've got all of that rubbed in, I'm just going to have a sip of coffee while I wait, because I reckon I might need to wait a little bit for you, and that's okay. So once we've got that pushed in, I want to start then looking at what's at the back and coming forward if we can. It's always easier to work back to front and top to bottom, as I've said a million times, but it makes more sense because as you come forward, there's more detail. And so we want to be doing that at the end. All right. So let's have a look at the back of this picture. You can see, just let me get my big one on the screen in front of me too. We've got grasses up here on the right-hand side, and they're quite blurred and soft. So we might start there and put these in. You don't have to put them in if you don't like them. If you'd rather leave them out, by all means, don't do it. But I will put a few of those in there, and you're welcome to come along with me. There's also some very blurry sort of green lines through here. And then as we move across the page, you can see some blurred, soft buds coming up through there, and a few little bits of grass and another bud over here, and that little flower that I just worked on before to give you the idea of the detail. So let's start with that section there. We'll just ignore all the flowery bits for now. Pick up your green. So I'm going to go with, what am I going to go with? I'm going to try this one. It might be too bright, but I can dull it down if I have to, and just do some of these soft grassy sort of shapes coming up through here. I've got a big chunky stick. This is an Art Spectrum Extra Soft, and they're square, lovely to work with, and I hate breaking them because they're just too yummy. So, but you can actually use them quite successfully on their side or their tip or whatever. They're very versatile, so it's a great shape to have. So just bringing that down through there. I'm going to put a few little grassy shapes around through here. Now, don't worry if you feel like it's too bright or too much. We can push it in and quieten it down a little bit. So we just want to try and create the feeling that this is a big field of flowers, and whoever took the photo is lying down or squatting down at flower level. So we're looking through the flowers into the background. We want to get some of these lovely grasses going on. Okay, so we'll just look at that area there. All right. Now I know that's a bit bright. What I'm going to do is get my mid green. That's this one I used up in the background trees, and just sort of go over the lines in some spots to try and create a bit of tone and shadow and variation in the colour. So not exactly over the whole thing, but just sort of brush it across those marks that you've made, so that it sort of gives it a bit of a feeling of density or shadow and tone. There we go. Beautiful. And as I said, these are all blurred and soft. So now we need to sort of push them in a little bit. So if you get your finger and you can push them in, we're going to put all this other stuff in front of them. Try not to blend, because if you pull, what will happen is it'll sort of blend the colour that's underneath it and make it look like it's been blended. So you've got to try and dab it more with your finger. You might have to wipe your finger off every now and again just to clean it off so that you're not continuing to carry extra colours up into areas where you don't want it. Okay, so I can just wipe my finger and then softly dab all of those marks. Not blending, just dabbing. Dabbing's good because it pushes the pigment into the paper and doesn't sort of blend it with whatever's around it. Good. So that's a few little bits and bobs in the background there. There's also a tiny suggestion of a purple flower just back there somewhere. It's just a little blob of purple. And then we've got our big blob of purple. There's another blob of purple that's high up in that dark area. So we can put that in there if you want. Might be a bit bright. Just whiten that down a tad. I'll get the other purple and come over it. That's the darker purple, just to mute that down a little bit. Don't want it to shine too much. All right. So now we've got a few bits of grass, and you can add some buds on the top just with that dark mid green. Don't go too dark because everything in the background is usually more muted, and we don't want to keep it, we don't want to have really dark colours that are soft and blurred in the background. So just kind of keep it all mid-tones and muted back there, and again just pushing it in. If you don't like that, you can take it off or make more or go over it, do whatever you need to do. So it's your painting, so you get to choose. I'm just going to throw a few more stems of something up here. I just want to interrupt that line where the yellow colour is and then goes into the green, just to make it all sort of flow nicely together. I put my purple flower over here in the wrong spot. I did too. Should be up higher. Oh well, doesn't matter. Okay. Again, I'm just going to tip off my dust. Lovely. All right, so that'll do for that section. Now, as we come forward, we're going to start looking at more detail. So let's start over here on the left. I've got a nice red, sort of quite a strong red colour there. It's just this little petal that's poking out from the side. If you frame your picture, you probably wouldn't even see it because it'll cover it up. Then we've got our blurry red back here. So I'm just going to strengthen that up a little bit. Again, I'm using the pastel on its side and just tilting it slightly. So I'm not putting the whole stick down. By tilting it and keeping it on its side, I get a sort of a smudgy mark without a hard line, but just a smaller mark. So just now we're just going to start to refine and work on the colours that we can see. Okay, so coming over now to this section here, there's a orangey coloured petal that sort of comes across like that, and then it sort of blurs off to the left side. So that's just in front of that purple flower that I put in before. There's an orange coloured petal just there. Trying to get a bit more of this orangey colour down on the page to stick. Oranges and reds are often a very hard pastel, and sometimes they don't stick very well. So you've got to hunt around for a good brand of reds. I found one in Paris once. It's very expensive, but I did buy it. Well, actually, Brian bought it for me. It's lovely, but I'm loath to use them because I know I'll never get another set. They're beautiful though. Okay, so just darkening off that orange reddy colour there. So what I'm going to do is run around this and put in all my red blobs with a bit more detail. We might alternate actually between our purples and reds just to make sure we get the purples behind the reds, or vice versa, depending on what's going on in each bit. So that's that top one there. But then we've got a petal here, which sort of comes down here. So blocking that one in too. So just putting nice firm, now we're darkening off. See, we're getting some really, really red kind of colour down onto the paper. And I can see in behind that guy, there's a bit of purple. So I'm just going to use this dark purple, and then I'm going to come over it with some light. Again, it's just a blur, isn't it? It's just softly blurred. So we're just going to blur that off. And then there's a bit more over here as well. So I'm just going to pop a bit of purple through here. So just noticing where all the little bits of purple are. This is my darker purple. I feel like that light one's not quite purple enough. But anyway, I'll use both. That way we get a nice range of tones. So just a bit of dark and light purple, dabbing, like that. Okay, so we're working on, let's say we're looking at the area above the halfway line. So we're sort of focusing on the flowers that run through this part here, or the elements that run through there, and then we'll move down. So we'll sort of just focus on that top area and move across and get some of the information in there that we need to have. Okay, so over on this side, I'm still in here. I'm going to get my other red. So this is my cooler red, my blue red. It's a little bit darker. I can see there's a more of a darker kind of tone through that. Just look at things as shapes, okay? We're not drawing flowers. Well, we are, but we'll pretend we're not. And everything is a shape. So that's a shape. And then it's also got some lovely little creases in the petals through here. So I've used my darker red to put those in just around there. And again, I'm going to dab them. So they're not strong, they're quite subtle. Okay, lovely. Coming around through there. Then I've just noticed my stem comes down in front of that bit of red there, so I can come back to my green. So there'll be a lot of toing and froing with this as we work our way across the page. You've got to kind of look at it and go, okay, so there's purple there. It sits below the red. I'm going to get another purple. I don't like that one. Need something a little darker, but not quite as dark as that one. Maybe this one's better. Yeah. Okay, so that's sort of in between those two. So now I've got 3 purples, which is nice, and 2 reds. I think this is probably closer to the purple I want. Yeah, that's better. It's like a jacaranda colour. You can actually get an Art Spectrum purple called jacaranda. It's glorious. Okay, so just putting some of that in there. Notice I'm just doing little marks. There's nothing definite here. I'm just looking at the shapes and the blobs, basically. So just doing little blobs of purple through that. I'll throw a bit of this into that little flower just to get the colours right. That light purple was a bit too light. I can save that for my highlights instead. There's a smoosh of purple back here. That's better. So just that area in there I'm looking at now. So it's all soft and blurred. So I can blur that off a little bit with my finger. I'm just patting it or dabbing. And we've got some green buds in front of it. So can you see those? So I'm going to use this darker green. It's not the darkest, but this green here. And just draw in some of those little shapes that are the buds, the green buds. Okay. There's a nice tall one there. Try to make them slightly different in size. So that's those guys. And there's a couple that pop up through here as well. So we can just draw in a few bits of stems and stuff there. These all have stems as well, so we can just draw a little line down like that. My stems are all a bit chunky, but never mind. Okay, so that's a little selection of the kind of idea that we're going to keep going through as we move across the page, kind of breaking everything down into pieces. Okay, so let's move over to here. And I'm just going to look at that for a second. Yeah, put a bit of light through here. So just noticing there's light sections and little dabs of light. That's just indicating sunshine and shadow. Looks a bit weird at the moment, but it'll all come together in the end. The other thing I want to do before we move on is just get a bit of dark onto these guys. So remember the right sides are darker because that's where the shadow is. So just with my darkest green, this is a phthalo green. And then I'm going to dab them again just to push that in softly. Again, I don't want it to be too strong because it's still off in the background. So we don't want to make them too bright or strong. And then I'm just going to use my lighter green. So I used my mid green to draw the buds, lighter green to put a bit of light on the left-hand side, and my darker green to put shadow on the right. So I know it's a bit fiddly, but they're just little blobs. Don't get too caught up in the detail. Okay, something like that. And then where we've got some of these little stems that are bending over, can you see there's a bit of light shining on those where the top of the stem's catching the light as it bends? So we can pop a little bit of light on those, just using the end of your pastel where you get a nice sharp edge. This one's been broken, so it's got a really nice fresh sharp edge on it. And again, we can just blur those off. All right, so we're using our lighter green to get some highlights on these things. Just in various places. We don't want big highlights in big areas. We just want to touch on a couple of spots. Okay, now all of this won't even be seen really by the end of the picture because there'll be other bigger areas that will catch your eye when you first look at it. But this is all the background stuff, so we need to get it in to make sense. I'm just going to bring this poppy in front of my purple flower a little bit more and across that way. Okay, so using my warm or orange red to get that in there. And that'll do for that bit. And then we've got a bit of dark, a bit more of this orange red that comes down through here. I know it's just on the halfway mark, but it comes down through there like that. So I can put the top part of that one in there because it sits on top of this guy. My dust. It's so annoying. For some reason, it doesn't all push into the paper. I'm not sure why. All right. We've got a bit of a little bud that comes up through here. That green bud that comes through there. It's sitting in front of that flower there, that poppy. We'll put a bit of a green, darker green knob on the top. Just zhoosh that through there and then again dab it in because I want to soften it off a little bit. Terrific. Okay, now just going to touch up my red. As I said, red's a hard colour. Sometimes they're really hard and they don't like to stick. So you've got to do a few layers or try a few different reds. All right, so moving over onto this guy now. So I'm going to come across to here. You can see that one has a bit of shadow underneath. I might see what purple does. It's got a little bit of a shadow just through here and then it dips up and goes like that. Can you see how that works? It's got some little creases down through the top of the petal. So the edges of these petals are sort of jagged. They're all uneven. I'll put a bit of purple around there. What I'm going to try and do is pull that down with my fingers and create what might look like hopefully a bit of a ruffle, like a skirt or a fold. So I know it looks weird right now, but let's see what happens. And if it doesn't work, I'll try something else. But I'm just going to pull that through like that. What I'm trying to do is create the shadows of the ruffles. I think that's quite good. That looks good. So what I did was I just drew, I'll tell you again, I'll show you what I did. got my purple, dark purple. I'm trying to create shadow in these petals, and I think the purple's a really good option, better than the dark red actually, even though it is dark red in the picture. I'm just going to create a bit more drama through there. Okay, so I got my purple and I ran it around kind of the edge of this flower in a little zigzaggy sort of loose shape. Okay, and then I did some lines like this. I'll do it dark so you can see what I'm talking about. Looks awful like that, but wait, there's more. Let me just get my finger. So what you want to do is get the pad of your finger and put it at the top edge where you drew your line and pull it down. So keep doing that as you work your way around the petal. And what it does is it loses its definition. That's too dark now because I drew it too dark. But I can soften it off, blur it off, and come back over with my red and lighten up some of those areas. Again, do that sort of stripy thing because I'm trying to indicate the creases in the petal. And they're sort of all different, aren't they? They're not all in the same direction. They go in different directions. I just wanted to show you how to do that with the purple. If you don't have if the purple's not going to work for you, then maybe a darker red or a burgundy or something like that. Just have a bit of a play and see what works. So if it doesn't work, you can just rub it in and get rid of it. And then across the bottom, you can see there's a bit of a shadow, very soft. It's not as dominant as this, but I did the purple across the bottom as well. And again, I'm pulling it up into the flower with the pad of my finger. So can you see how that's now created what looks like a 3D flower, because this front petal here is sitting in front of that bit there at the back, which has the creases and a little bit of darkness. So I hope that made sense. I'll just tip off my dust. Yeah. So bringing that lighter red, this orangey red, across the top there in a little jagged shape. So it should be more jagged than what I had it. And it kind of sits forward. And because it's a separate petal from the one at the back there, it's catching the light and sitting forward. So that gives us the look that it looks like it's a 3D, or, you know, solid object. So you have to play around a little bit with your shadows and stuff and just find out what's going to work best for you. And then use your other red. So where it's kind of darker, I'm just going to go across here a bit of that now. So I want to red it up a bit more. Poppies are quite tricky to do. Most flowers are actually, because the thing with flowers is they're all one color, right? So this is a red poppy, but you've got to have so many tones of the same color to get them to look like they've got petals. So you've got to really work out your shadow colors and what you're going to use to make things light or dark or whatever to create the feeling of the depth of the flower without changing colors. But use other colors to help you do it. So see, I've just done the dark red behind there. It actually should come out a bit wider, a bit more jagged like that. Around the edges. Okay. And I'm going to put more of that dark red inside this petal at the back of the flower. So that's trying to create some depth. So you can see how that's a little darker through there. So it's creating a bit of depth over the purple and the other red that I used. So you can use a few colors to try and help you find your tones. Okay. And then I can come back again with this darker red and just do a few creases in there to indicate, again, the folds. The purple is helping to create shadow. And then the red's also giving it some definition. We don't have to do a lot of detail. Now, on the front petal, this one here, I used the warmer red. So it's still red, but it's a different tone or type. And then just drawing in that little petal that sort of sits here on its own out the front, in front of that one. And it comes up in a little peak here. Okay. So I'm just dabbing that in softly. I just want to push all that in a little bit. And then I can come back with my darker red and put some of the little creases in the folds at the top of this petal here. And softly push them in too. So hopefully that starts to look like it's all one flower with separate petals. It's fiddly, a bit fiddly. And again, you don't have to do all that detail if you don't want to. You can just let that be a bit of a blob in the background. Depends on how much information you want to include. So we'll move over now to the purple flowers here that are on the side. There's a little smush of purple just through here. So again, I'm just going to do little blobs like this to suggest that, and then dab it in. Okay, so that's just purple off in the background. And then I'm just going to move over and put some more purples in, because it looks to me like the purples are mostly behind the main flowers. So let's come back over here to the other side of the big flower in the middle and just zhoosh a bit of purple through there as well. Okay, because that's telling me that there's a fair bit of purple flowers through here, up through here. Like it comes up about where the red and the green areas meet. And we can just do a few little, blobs of purple. So I'm using the end of my stick. So you can see the different marks that I want to make, I'm using different parts of the pastel sticks. So for these soft, blurry bits, I just want to use the end of the stick without a sharp part. So that's when I kind of put it on its side like that, but I lift up one end. So that gives me a nice sort of soft, blurry mark. Okay, so I'm just zhooshing around in here. I know I've gone below the halfway mark, but anyway. And getting some purple into the background there, because that's going to be behind the red flowers. Now, I've got a fair bit of purple on there, so now I'm going to pick up my darker purple and just zhoosh that around in some places, because what I want to do is create some tones and some shadows and variation in the purples, because if it's all one flat color, it won't look like anything. But so we need to add lights and darks. Okay, so just zhooshing around. I'm going to dab all of this in soon. Now there is a couple of defined flowers in there that we can do a bit more detail on. So we've got one here, which is it's just a blur really, isn't it, back here? So I'll just keep blurring. Got a couple of taller ones here. So there's a couple there that sort of stand out. And this is how you make, a field of flowers or a bunch of flowers look like flowers. You just define a couple of them, and then everything else becomes a flower without too much help. Okay, so if you just work on one or two or three, and suddenly they look like flowers. It's quite magical. So this one here, I'm putting a bit of dark purple into the middle of it. I'll come back over with the other one in a minute. It's got a bit of light on it too, which is lovely, catching the sun. So dark in the middle, and then the mid over that, sort of just marking in shapes for the petals. It's also got a lovely stem on it with a dark green thingy underneath it. So that's about there with my dark green. And then I need my other green to draw the stem. I'll just pull that down through there like that. So I've got a lot of stems and bits of grass that sort of come in around here and on top of some of these purple areas, so we can start to look at that too in a minute. Just get this flower done. And then we've got a few little light bits on the tips of those petals. So that just sort of highlights one little flower and helps us to see that there's lots of them without doing all the info. Just have to suggest things. I'll blur that off a little bit because again, it's still off in the distance and it's not very strong in its detail. So grab your light purple and just sort of look around with that. You can put a few little petal type shapes here and there to indicate your purple flowers. Need a bit more dark in that guy. I need a darker dark. So we don't want to use too much dark in this background section. Okay, and then I'm going to come back over with a bit more red where I can see some red poking through here. So we're just sort of blurring some red in around there. It's quite bright in some spots, so you can brighten up some areas and leave others a bit dull. Just putting that through there like that. Okay. And as I said, there's a fair bit of green grassy sort of lines through here. So I'm going to tip off some dust and then we'll pop a few stems in there. Get a bit of the green through there. Like this. We want to make it look like it's thick and lush and full of flowers. There's a few little green buds in there as well, so you can pop some little bud shapes in there with your green and maybe highlight some of them with a bit of lighter green on the top. So I'll get my lighter green and I can put a little bit of the light in, just in some, not all of them. We don't want to highlight every single one. We just want to limit it to a few because we'll do more highlights in the foreground. Grab your dark green as well. So use a few, a few different greens to get some variation again in the tone. So there's so much stuff in here, isn't there? You don't realise until you start painting it how much there is. So that's lovely. The purple's looking quite nice. I like what's going on there. You've got to have a bit of imagination sometimes because, you can get to this stage and think, oh, goodness, what's going on? It looks terrible. But bear with me. Like I said, I've never painted this before either, so we're all learning together. There we go. So see how that's all sort of soft and blurred? So we just want to push it off to the background. We've got a couple of flowers that actually look like flowers, so that's going to help us to, give the idea that these are flowers. And then we can carry on. So we might now focus on the red areas. So we've got to get these flowers across to here in this section. We've pretty much done that bit. So now we can work across the page. So we've got to figure out what's behind and what's in front. So I can see we've got a little bit of red behind in here. Sort of just there. There's a little bit of a petal poking through. Darker red in front of it. So I'm just breaking this down into parts now and looking at sections. I think I've gone below my halfway mark. Oh, well, I have. That's all right. I'll just come back over the top here. So this is why we try not to load up too much pastel onto the page at the start, because as we build up the layers, you need to be able to get more on. I'm just going to block in that red bit there. Okay. And there's a little red bit there. We've got another red bit over in here. So remember those bits that we had in there before. So I'm just going to darken those off a little bit more so that they look more bright. Lovely. All right. So that's okay. And then we've got this guy here in front. So that comes down below the halfway mark. So I might just leave that there for a minute and we'll come back to that. Come back over to this middle one. So it looks to me like there are 1, 2, maybe 3 flowers in that area. We've got a lovely big one on the top here, so we can focus on that and do a bit of detail. But behind that one, there's another one. So let's focus on what's behind first and just get some of that red tone in through there. So it's more of an orangey red, that bit there through there. Just going to push that in. Again, it's leaving a lot of dust on my page, so I'll have to tip that off in a minute. So that's kind of come down through there. It's got a little dip, comes up like that. So this is the flower that's sitting behind that middle one. It's tall. Okay. I find red such a challenge. Just tip off my desk again. Because still I've got another red. I've got lots of reds. It's just finding the right one. This is a unison. Let me see. Ooh, that's a bit nice, isn't it? That's better. Now we're in business. So you've just got to find something. It's a bit creamier. So now it's hanging on better. Yeah, that's nice. All right, I'm about to change to this red, I think. I just want to see what this one does. This is an Art Spectrum Extra Soft. Oh, that's lovely too. So that can be better, much better. Not looking quite as dull as it was. So I might just touch these up a little bit now. So this is the process. Yeah, that's better. I don't know if it's too bright. That unison one's quite bright. It's lovely. It's got some, be nice for highlights actually. This one can be like orangey red, like lighter red. And then I'll find a darker one. I can get a better one that's dark. I actually have this set of reds. You'd think there'd be something in there that might do it for me. Let me see. See what I mean? They're sort of not more pinky colours than bright. That's a bit nice. That one's all right. I don't know. I just find it really difficult to find a lovely red. Ooh, ooh, hello. Ooh, you're nice. There we are. There we are. Now we're in business. That's better. So I know you're not going to have the same pastels that I've got, especially if you've just started out, because they're not cheap. It takes a while to get a nice collection. But as I mentioned, reds are, it's just hard to get a really good, beautiful red, you know? And I love red. Red is one of my favourite colours. I do enjoy painting with it, but only if I've got good pastels to use. So I think I might just keep them. And, you know, even pinks, see, that's kind of, I just want to see what that does if I put it onto the red. That's quite nice. It could be nice for some little highlights too. Oh yeah, lovely. Or that pink I tried before, the first one I picked up. Not so good. It's this one here is a bit more purple, whereas that one's a bit more pink. I think that's a better option. So I'm going to keep that and get rid of that one. All right. Let's see. So what have I got here now? I've got that one for my dark, that one for my mid, and one for my light. So that'll do. Get rid of that. Do I need you? Do I? You're quite lovely. Put you there in case. Okay, that's better, much nicer. Because the reds in the picture are quite bright, aren't they? They're beautiful and vibrant. And it's disappointing if you can't get lovely bright colours. I'll just tip my dust off again. So while I waffled on there, hopefully you had some time to get stuck into yours. Okay, I'm just going to go back over here and darken off where I need it to be darker. Just for a bit of volume and texture. Darken off in there. That's lovely. Yeah, these Art Spectrum Extra Soft Squares are beautiful pastels. So if you, you know, are out shopping, have a look, see if you can find them. They're quite lovely. I do like Art Spectrum. It's a good brand. Now, this is my lighter red. So they're just so creamy. They're a bit creamier than the regular ones. There, much nicer. And do I need a dark still? Or do I try the blue violet and see what that does? Is it going to be too dark? See how with pastels, it's really good because you can try things on your page or on a scrap page. Probably a better idea to have a bit of extra pastel paper nearby that you can test things on and just see what works. That's creating a really nice bit of a shadow on there. So I might keep that. This is my blue violet, so the darkest one that we picked up at the start for all the dark areas. If you just do it lightly, it might give you enough of a dark, but not too much. You can just dab it and soften it off a little bit if you find it's too much. So yeah, that's a goodie, that one, the blue violet. And I think it also comes in the extra soft pastels, but I just buy the normal sticks for that. Okay, that's much better. Oh yes, good. All right, so let's move on. We need to come over here. What was I doing? I was working on that one behind, wasn't I? So let's put this colour on there because it's kind of darker than the one on top in some spots. So I'm just going to use this red here to that underneath the one on top. So I'm going to push that in. Still quite dusty. And then we've got this lovely dark area down through here. See through there, there's a little bit of a darker red. I'm going to have to find something darker. I'll just use my blue violet. Stop getting more colours. Okay, I'm going to darken that off through there with a bit of my blue violet, okay? Or you could use purple. Purple in red is yummy. That's nice, oh nice. And that gives you some lovely shadows. See how that petal underneath there is quite dark? So we really need to focus on how to make something dark or light using the same colours. So it's a little bit tricky and requires a fair bit of just studying the picture and working out, you know, how can I lighten or darken that? If that petal's on top of that petal, how can I make it look like that, not just one blob of colour? So it's all about the tones, tone. I'm just going to use this light pinky color to get a bit of light in there. So underneath this one here, there's a little petal hiding, and it's kind of tucked in below there. So we just, again, we need to differentiate it from the one above it. So we've got to try and find another color that also fits in with the picture. So you can see it's catching a bit of light just there, and it's lighter up under there. And it kind of curls around. So now we've got this sort of curly petal coming around like that. And again, I'm just going to darken the red off through there. I should take the label off this. It's a bit hard to see what I'm doing. That everything's a shape. Just break it all down into shapes. Don't worry about what it is. Just focus on the shapes. So a bit more dark across through there. That should just give it a bit more depth and make it sit underneath this one I'm about to do more on. So I'll just tip off my dust again. Okay, so come back to this guy. We need to get that one sorted out, so then we can move on to this one. And that one also has a few tones and things in it. So I'm just going to try a bit of purple here and there to create some creases and edges. The purple's quite good actually. So this is the darker purple, not my darkest blue violet, but the deeper purple I was using for the flowers. It seems to be creating quite a nice ruffled look that I'm after for these petals. Still not happy with you over there, but anyway. And then we want to put this fella in. So this one has this beautiful stem. I'm just going to draw the stem in. I know it's going to be too light, but we'll sort that after. Starts about here and goes down and has this curly thing going on. So I know down here isn't completed, but I just needed to get that in so I can kind of figure out the flower part. And we'll go over it later and define it more when we come forward and get all that other info in. So let's have a look at this guy. This one has a dark middle. So I'm going to put some blue violet here, right? That's going to be the middle bit, and I'll build the petals around it. So something like that, and just dab it with your finger to push it in. Okay. So that's going to be where the middle comes in. Now we've got to look at this guy because this one is quite detailed, and it's going to show us that we're looking at poppies. So the back petal, we've got to work from underneath to the front. So there's a back petal here up the top, just there. And I'm using my mid red. Okay, it's got a few crinkles and things in it. So I can come back then with my bit of purple and just dab some of that on and then blend it through. So that's the back petal. Then there's another petal that comes in front of it. So I'll show you where that sits. It sits about here. I'll just draw it in this lighter red so you can see what I mean. It comes across here like this and then out nice and wide and around. Okay. So that sits there. And then if I fill that one in with my mid-red again, so then we've got to find a way to make this look like it's sitting in front of that first petal that we did at the back. Okay, so this one sits here. I'll put some mid-red on there and my lighter red as well. So it's got a few little creases through it. There's a bit of dust in the way, but I'll get rid of that in a sec. Okay, so that's that part of that petal. And then again, just get the pad of your finger and pull it down from the edge in towards the middle of the petal. When you do that, you're creating little marks that indicate the shape of the petal, but also the texture of it because it's got those crinkly folds in it. And if you find that's not enough, then maybe you want to put a bit more of your purple on to just create a bit of shadow through there. And then again, pull it down with your finger gently, gently. Try not to blend it in too much because we want to try and create the feeling of a shadow. So that goes down into here. And then there's something else in front of this one. So it's again sort of not at the back, but it is behind what we're going to put in next. Now let me see, where does the rest of it go? It's tricky when you zoom in here. Great when you've got a screen and you can zoom in, because sometimes the printed picture doesn't give you enough information. All right, so what we've got by the looks of it is there's another petal that sits. I'll show you what I'm talking about. I think anyway, from what I can see, I could be wrong, but I think it comes down through there, something like that, and around like that. There's another little petal that sits there. Oh, no, it's higher. Comes across here. So it comes sort of like that through there. So I'll push that around. Now it's actually darker than the petal behind it, but I don't know if I can make that darker. Or do I need to lighten the one behind? See, this is the problem, isn't it, when you're doing these things? That'll do. Be fine. Be fine like that. Okay. So it's got this little shape that comes around like that. And I'm just noticing there's a bit of darkness through there. So I'm going to push that in with my blue violet to deepen the middle bit like that. And then underneath here, there's another little bit of dark, because there's another separate petal that comes across the front there. So this guy is going to have lots of information and detail. So there's a little squiggly line that comes through here like this. I don't know if you can see that or not. I'll do it in this lighter red to show you. Just through there. Went up too high. So just a little line like that that kind of indicates another petal sitting in the front. And then it comes around, actually, that joins up. I think that joins up to this bit. Not. Oh, maybe that sits there in front of that bit. Goodness me, so confusing. Yeah. So then the main front petal comes up into a peak over here on the left, and then it comes down. It's got this lovely soft edge on it, and then it comes up like here to there. So hopefully you can see what I'm talking about. And then it comes across the middle here. So we've got that beautiful dark center that goes down into that, or from that petal. So it kind of comes down, curls around like this. All right, so that's where our tones are going to be important. And there's also a little fold here in front, just there. So I've got the outlines in for this section here. We'll put some colour on now, and hopefully it'll start to make sense. So I'll put some colour on there. That's that little flap bit that's coming around the front here. And then it comes up around through here. It's darker down through the middle there. And then this bit comes down across there. So I'm just filling all this part in too. And then I'm going to blend it in with my finger, gently, gently. because we don't want to blend this too much. This is the one that has a fair bit of the detail in it. Should have just done one poppy, not a whole field of them. Anywho, we can do it. Okay, now in the middle there, see where we've put that dark part earlier? I hope I'm seeing this right. Anyway, pull that up into this part of the petal so that it looks like it's going down inside it. And then this area here comes across in front of that dark section. So there's quite a strong line here between the dark and the petal. So that looks like it's sitting in front, and then the petal curls around to here, I think. Sometimes we see things differently. So if you see it in a different way, then do what you see. I'm just trying to look at it in tone and shape and figure out which bits go where. And I think that's near enough. It's sort of looking like a poppy, kind of. I want to darken off this bit here. I'll get rid of some of that dark in there. And bring that around through here. So it's quite fiddly, bit of fiddling around to get that to work. And as you can see, you need quite a few different reds, don't you, to make it not look too washed out. It's hard though with the reds. Okay, just putting some of my darker red in here because I want to get some depth and feeling of solid sort of, well, you know, 3D solid object. All right, darken off this fella here. So it's a bit fiddly. It's a small area to work on. That's why if you do flowers, it's much easier to go really big when you do with pastels, because you've just got room to get your fingers in there and mix things around. When you're doing small things like this, it's easier to be blurry. Okay. I'm just going to fiddle around and give you some time to finish off that bit. I can muck around over here with this guy. When you change colours halfway through, you've got to go back and touch up what you've done that, might need to kind of match in with everything else. Just fiddling around. Touching things up as we go. I'm just noticing where it's light and where it's dark, putting a little bit of different reds here and there to try and create some interesting tones. And as you keep building up your layers and getting into the detail, that's when you stop blending too much and start to just focus on, the finer marks and things and not pushing it in too much. I'm just getting a bit more purple into here now. I want to fill up some of this. So again, just working around your painting, noticing, some areas might not have enough pastel or colour, so patching up areas as you go across. So I can see moving across here, this petal, that flower should be lower, so there's more purple above there. So just working your way across, noticing the picture, noticing the blocks of colour So I'm just blocking in purple around here. I'm not worried if I blend a bit of red or green or whatever into it, because that just sort of sends it back anyway. Gives me a bit more information. So, and then coming back in with my red. So down in here, we've got a lovely little bit of a red splash next to that dark bit. And then in front of that one, we have another poppy. So that one back there is sort of blurred and softened off. Can't really see much detail, but this one here has more information in it. So we can do something similar with that one. But before that, we need to come in and do what's behind it, because that will make our life easier afterwards. So always, we'll just go down a bit below the halfway mark here and start to mark in this little petal underneath the main flower that sits here. So just getting that in there, looking around while you're doing it, thinking, oh, yep, there's more purple down here. So we're moving down the page. Over here, just before we do that, go beyond that halfway mark, we've just got to put a bit more red in over on this side, but again, there's not a lot of detail there. So that's just all sort of blurry and purples and reds mixed in together. Again, indicating things are wandering off into the distance. So we've pretty much got the top half sort of done, mostly. And we'll come back over that and fine tune some of that detail later on as we move forward, because there are forward things that go up beyond that line. But we'll come over now and we'll start to go down below the halfway mark now. I think I'm well below it, but anyway. There's a red poppy over on the right hand side here. So again, just looking at what's around that. So we need to come in now with a bit more green. I'm just going to zhoosh a bit more green through here. So we haven't really put a lot of background down in here yet, so we can start to sort of work on that as we move our way across the picture or the page. Again, just some grassy shapes, so up and down blending softly, softly to get some of the feeling of the texture in there of the grasses and the stems of the flowers. Okay, and then a bit of purple zhooshing around in here. So mixing up your purples, bit of dark, bit of light. Don't have to put too much detail in, remember? We're just doing little shapes like that. And that's going to tell us that they're flowers. If you do a little bit of dark and a little bit of light and dash of sunshine here and there, dab it in, soften it off. Put some stems in, so continue those from down here up into there. Just keep it really simple. Okay, because we've got to get all this stuff into the background before we do the foreground. So again, just looking at this flower here, which is on just below the halfway line, but sort of off center. So I'm going to put some more purple in behind there first, because there's a fair bit of purple flower through there. I know we did that earlier, but I used my very light purple, so it's looking a bit washed out. I'm just going to zhoosh it up a bit more with my middle purple, my beautiful jacaranda colour. Okay, so just a bit of that. Then you can get some of your dark purple, a few little marks of that. See, I'm not being terribly particular about where I put this. It's just trying to create shadow and light. And there'll be more green to go around it. Something like that. Give it a little dab, just dabbing and pushing in. This is all off in the distance. We don't need any detail. We're just zhooshing around the different colours and the different tones to softly, softly suggest these little flowers that are off behind everything else. Okay. And then I'm going to get some green. Where's that nice one gone? There it is. Just a bit of green through there as well. So that just indicates we've got some grasses and things coming through with the flowers. Kind of got to make it all look really natural, like it's all merging in together nicely. Don't need to put all those main bits of grass in just yet, but we can certainly start working towards that. There might be some couple of stems and things, like the one that belongs to this flower that we just did before up the top. I've just marked a stem in on that. Needs to have a bit of light and dark on it. It's probably a bit too wide actually. Anyway, I'll just go over it with some red and get rid of it. See how you can fix things quite easily. Bit of dark up underneath where the flower petals are. Like that. Dab it in. Then a bit of light green. There's a little bit of a shine. Whoops, missed just there on the edge. It's hard to find the right spot sometimes. So just softly, softly like that, and doing a few little petally kind of shapes now with my lighter purple on this background stuff. See, I'm making all the same shapes and the same pattern. So twist your arm around or change the way you're holding the pastel if you want to get some various shapes in. Like that. Come back over with your other purples. So see how I'm sort of layering my purples here to try and create a thick kind of feeling of flowers. I'm just doing little marks that might maybe look like petals, maybe, if you're lucky. Just blurring that off a little bit. Getting a bit more green in there. Break it up with some greens. You might find a different way to do this. Just because I'm doing it this way doesn't mean it's the only way. There's lots of ways to do different things with pastels. Just putting a bit of dark purple in now to create some depth. So you want to keep working on your background like that until you're happy with it. Because once you put those other things on top, it's a bit more difficult to get in underneath. So that's why I like to get everything done that's going to be underneath first. And then I can work on the top and focus on that. Sometimes your background takes longer than your foreground. It just depends on how much information you need to get into it. I've got a bit of this dark green. I'm going to put a bit of dark green through here just to create some depth, because even though this is underneath everything, it's still got depth. There's still shadow there. If the light's shining on top of these flowers, and there's got to be shadow underneath them. So I'm just going to throw a bit of this dark green in, dab that around, and see what happens. Again, I've lost my light, so put a few bits of light in where the petals might be catching some sun. Just suggesting a few, that's all. Nothing in detail. Okay. So I think we might move on from there in a second and get stuck into the reds again. Purple's also lovely for shadows in your grasses too, I just remembered. So if you want to put a bit of that through here, and then when we build on top of it afterwards, we'll have some nice shadow underneath. Lovely, lovely. You can suggest the shapes of flowers in a couple of spots, and then that just sort of makes it all look like they're all flowers, you know what I mean? So if you just see something, one thing in amongst a bunch of other things that are all the same color that indicate that they're flowers, then that should be enough to help create that, you know, thick field of flowers or whatever it is you're drawing, grasses, rocks, whatever. Okay, that will do. I'm getting bored with this now, so I'll come back to it after. Okay, let's move on. Now we need to focus on this mess here. My mess anyway. I reckon this petal sits sort of underneath everything. That's a separate flower right there. So again, it's just shapes and tones. So it's a lighter red. There's a bit more light red that runs across here. I'm trying not to get too caught up in the detail because we need to save the detail for just a couple of the flowers, and then the rest can kind of just suggest what they are. So just making this sort of looking like it's underneath what we're going to do next, and just playing with my reds, getting a bit more dark through here. So there's a lovely dark petal or darker red through there. Tummy's rumbling. All right. Now, again, I'm just going to darken off that bit there with a bit of purple and create some depth and shadow. Okay, and then that'll give us something to build on because it's quite dark in that bit there. Beautiful. Now, the base of this flower, he sits about here. I'm just going to draw an outline in, show you where I'm thinking. About here. It's got a little stem that comes there like that. So that's the stem. And then again, it's a bit tricky to see which bits are which, but if we just look at shapes, hopefully we'll be able to figure it out. So it sits about there. We have a lovely dark section just here. I'm going to use my blue violet for that because by the time I get some red over that, it'll not be quite so dark. But there's a lovely dark shadow at the bottom of this flower here. Okay, so that's that part there. I'm going to tip my dust off again. Righty-ho. Now we've got that in, we've got to look at the back of this flower, which sort of comes around here. I'm using this middle, more orange red for this part because I want to use a lighter red for the highlights, but I want to use a darker red to go down into the center. So this comes around like that. Actually, I think that bit's part of this flower, isn't it? Is it? Hard to tell. No, it's not. No, it's not. It's separate because the stem's in front of it. Okay, so this bit comes down like that. And then we have another part that comes around like this, just drawing outlines so you can see. You can't really see, can you? With the pencil here. So we've got a petal that comes across like that. This one comes around here. And then that cuts across here and goes around. There's a bit that comes around underneath there. And then we have this petal coming out through here. And then there's another one sort of in there, I think. I think that's sort of what it is. So we need to make sure that this dark area stays nice and dark. We've got a deep red down the middle here. So if we do the middle bit here, in a dark red, so dusty. So dusty. I'm going to tear some of this paper off, I think. That's the trouble with these. And then you won't know what colour it is. Poppy red C. Oh, fancy that. Poppy red. Ah, who knew? Art Spectrum did, obviously. Okay. Poppy red. So I get that into that middle petal, because it's the darker red. It's quite yummy. And I'm going to put some of it around here as well on the outside bit, which then blends down into that darker area. So I just want to get some of this darker red down through that and then blend that in. So we've got a nice shadow kind of thing going on there. Tipping off my dust. You know, you can save your dust. If you have a tray on your easel, you can trap all your dust and then mix it all together with a dash of water and create a new pastel. Quite fun. Okay, middle red. This is my middle red. So this one can come across here like this because it's a bit lighter than that darker red. Chunky sticks, they're hard to see where the edge touches the paper. I think it's about there-ish. And it comes out nice and wide around there like that. And then it comes down, and as it goes down, it gets darker. So we've got to make sure we blend down into that dark section down through there. So pulling that down towards the dark, and if you've lost your dark, you might have to come and pop more in, which I'll do in a sec. And then this outer petal, this first one out here, is a bit lighter. How am I going to make that lighter than the one below it? Because it's got to stand out on top of it. I'm going to have to add a bit more of my pinky colour, I think, through there. And then just running around the edge to get that edge in there like that. Okay, so that's that one. And then I can push that in softly. Again, I'm getting a lot of dust. Let's tip that off again. And then my dark's back in through here. So I want that to be darker. I want more drama here. I'm going to darken that off through there. Pull it up from the base into the top of the petal. So we're merging up nicely to get that lovely little dark patch. And that helps it stand out from the other flowers and brings it forward because it's got more detail. Okay, now I'm going to go back to my dark purple and put a bit more shadow, some of those creases in through here. Just softly, softly, like that. And then maybe some around the edges of the outside petal, just to create a little bit of more ruffle through there. Like that. And then I've got shadow down here. There's a shadow on that petal coming through here. And then I need to highlight this guy because this one is catching the light. So if I use my pinky, what's that called? Scarlet A. So a light pink or a light red, and then just softly push it in so that it's not too strong. That silly symbol on my screen that's right in the middle there. So I'll pull it across a bit. And I might just use this one again. Now let me see, is this lighter or darker than the one underneath it? It's slightly lighter, not much, but just a little bit. This is why it's hard to see because they're all the same color. So if I use that light red over that pinky color, then it starts to create something that's slightly lighter than the tone under it. So all these things you've got to think about. It's a bit tricky getting all this right. So worth it though. Flowers are beautiful to paint, but they do take a long, long time because there's so much detail. You don't realize until you start trying to paint them how much detail there is. Now, just around here, I need to put a little line to indicate that that's a separate petal and it's casting a shadow underneath there. So just through here, using my blue violet, just make a little line to separate those two, and hopefully that will be enough to make them stand apart. I feel like I still need to lighten up this guy. I'm going to grab, what's this, my creamy color. This is my light that I was going to use before my white. So I'm just going to put a bit of that on. I really like yellow or warm-based lights to add into reds, because otherwise, if you put white in, they go kind of pink, milky, whereas this is a cream, so it's got a bit of a yellow base. They're a little bit more golden and warmer. So I don't like using too much pink or white in my reds because it dulls them down and they get a bit milky. That's just me. It's still not working. I know what I've got to do. I've got to darken up the guy underneath. I think that might be the secret. Let's see if that works. So sometimes if you can't get something the right light, you've not got to darken around it. Still not working for me. Let's see, darken inside here. Maybe that'll help. There we are. Now we're getting there. So you've just got to try different things until you get it how you need it to be. It's a tad better. I still don't like the outline around it. Looks like it's got a line around the edge. So I'm just going to come back in now with this lighter red and continue that around so that it looks like it's joining up to there. And maybe darken off this guy underneath again. Just put a bit of purple in. That'll make it nice and dark. Still not happy, Jan. It's looking too pink. It needs to all be uniform. We need more red in here. It needs to look like that they belong together. Getting better. Tip off my dust. That'll do, I think. We'll move on. Okay. So that's that guy. Just going to give it a little stem so I know when it comes down from about there. And then it gets lost behind other flowers as we move forward. It's not a very good stem, is it? Let's see if I can get it to be a bit greener. There we are. That'll do. Dab, dab. Pushing it all in. Beautiful. All right, so we'll keep moving around. We'll go across to the right now. Now I can see I need to put more purple things in here. So I'm just going to zhoosh a few more purple blobs through there. and then maybe a bit of greenery as well. So I'm just coming across. So you've got to kind of touch it up as you go. A bit more green. So when you're putting green in, just start to sort of do grassy marks now as we come forward, because we've got more detail coming through. So sort of, you can see in the picture that it's sort of got all different lines and shapes and tones of green. We've just got to try and get some of those softly blended through. We don't want to make it too obvious, just softly, softly. Something like that, so that it's all merging nicely together. Okay, a few more bits of purple through here. There we go, that'll do. And a couple of little bits of light. I'm using my light green. You can see some little buds popping up here and there with light shining on them. Gorgeous. Just going to touch up these guys on the right here now. So these are literally just blobs of colour again. Little bits of red. There's not much, there is some detail, but not enough to get too caught up with it. So this guy here on the far right has a little petal that comes out to the side like that. I'm using my mid red, and then I'll grab my darker red, and I can see there's a triangle shape there. There's another little shape that comes across like that. Another one that goes up around there, and then it's sort of darker red underneath. So see how I just put those shapes in that I can see in the picture. I can't see it as well on the print, but you can see it's slightly darker there. And then we've got this V shape here. So we've left a bit of a triangle there in the lighter red, and I can see that much more clearly on my screen. So knowing that now, I can have a triangle there. So see, I've just put my darker red over the lighter red. I'm just going to dab it softly, push that in, and that should be enough information there to leave that one as it is. So that's the sort of thing we're going to run around and do now. Okay, so that'll do for that one. If you want to, you could, where's my light red again? This one. Put a slightly lighter red edge just across the top there where it might be catching a bit of light. And then that will do. Same over here. Well, just softly, softly. And then we can move down. So now here we've got, there's a nice big red shape here. So that comes across down through here, and there will be grasses on top of this one. And there's another bit of red down through there, so we can put a blob of red there and another one there. They still do have some tone and different shapes, so you just need to put your dark red behind on the right there, and a bit of lighter red over the top. But there's not a lot of detail, is there? So again, just putting some reds down in here. Again, checking your background, just working your way around the page. Little bits of purple here and there. And then we'll put grasses over the top of those. So we'll keep moving around doing that. Again, purples. We've got another lovely red shape here. So all these seem to be hiding behind other flowers and buds and things. So we can just literally move across the page, putting in our reds, looking at your different reds. So, you know, we've got a bit of a lighter red on this bit here. So that little petal sits in front. I'm not going to put all the detail in there, but we can just suggest things. If you've done any of Steffi Clark's stuff, that's what she does. She's a genius at it. Absolute genius. If you get a chance to do one of her workshops, then do, because it's just so good and you learn a lot. All she does is flowers. Steffi Clark, look her up. She teaches all over the world, and I was lucky enough to get her to come out to Pittsworth and give us a day in, when was that? February, I think. And she's coming back. So she's doing 2 days in June. It's $160, I think, if you're not a Pittsworth Art Group member. But that's pretty good value for a 2-day workshop with a genius like her. I know Carolyn came and did it and had a great time, the last one. But yeah, she's coming back, which is amazing. And I think she's also coming in November. I think I locked her in for as many times as I could because she's just awesome. And she's also a really lovely, lovely person. So if you're really keen to learn more about doing flowers, have a look at her work. She does the most amazing background. She's an absolute genius with pastels, and she loves pastels to death. And when she comes, she brings all her pastels and she lets everyone use them, and she's got brands from all over the world. So even that alone is worth its weight in gold, because you get to try different brands and different things. And you just learn so much from her. She's amazing. So if you want to come, let me know. It's pretty full already. I'm not sure what the limit is, but yeah, let me know, because I'll book you a spot, and you don't have to pay until the day. So what are the dates? I think it's the 20. Let me check my calendar. Probably come up on your screen now. 23rd and 24th of June. Anyway, it's a Friday and Saturday. So if you're working, you'll have to take a day off. And if you're far, far away, you'll have to come to Australia. But anyway, look her up. She's awesome if you haven't seen her already. If you haven't, I'll be surprised, because she's just everywhere. She posts in all the pastel groups on Facebook whenever she does anything, and she paints nearly every day. She's on Patreon, so you can buy her courses and classes and stuff on there. She's just been in New Zealand teaching, and I think she's going to France maybe soon anyway to teach. She's wanted all over the world, so to get her here, pretty amazing. Okay, so you can see I'm just doing these blobs, and I'm just looking for lights and shadows, playing with my different tones of reds, okay, to indicate edges of petals, where the sun's catching, shadows, etc. So looking at the picture and just noticing where there's a little bit of dark or a little bit of light in all these beautiful reds. And as they're coming forward, they're getting a little bit more blurred and softer. So we don't need to put as much detail into these ones in the front, because we're going to go over them with lots of grasses and shapes. Okay, so don't be too stressed about getting the detail in. We've done detail on those couple, and that's enough information really for people to understand what this is. So don't stress too much. And once you've done that, then just again touch up some of your purples, and then we'll go over all of this with some greens, and it'll become a beautiful mess. Beautiful mess. I love beautiful messes. Smushy, smushy, purples, purples, reds, reds, whatever. Put a few little dark spots into. Once you start getting into, finishing this off and looking at the foreground and getting some grasses and things in, this is where we start to look around and go, oh, there's a dark splotch there. We want to now start creating depth, all right? So I'm using my blue violet, and I'm just sort of softly running around, getting a bit of what I call shadow in. Okay, because when we put our greens over the top of this, it's all going to start to create a lovely, thick, lush kind of feeling. And so I want to create, we need to get shadow in, we need darks under the greens, and then we're going to put some lights in and create some highlights. So it's just about now thickening up all this foreground area so that it looks lovely and lush. Just a bit of shadow in here. And then we can do some grass. So I've got my khaki green, I'm calling this one, and it's just going to, I'm just going to start to build up all the grasses and things around this area. Okay, so coming across the page, we've got some tall ones, short ones, fat ones, skinny ones, all the different ones. We want to bring these beautiful green stems down. So remember we had that one here that was at the top. I don't know where the top of it went. I'll have to put that back on. But we've got lots and lots of green stems coming through here. So beautiful bendy ones, straight ones, all different shapes. Some bend all the way over. So don't forget to put some bent ones in. Where we've put some on flowers but didn't continue them down, you want to maybe do that now so we can bring them all the way down. They might sit behind other flowers that are in the front, or they might come in front of them. So I'm just going sort of fairly slowly, for me anyway. I'm pretty quick usually, but I just want to go softly, gently, being quite deliberate with your grassy shapes. Okay. Over the top of all these purple flowers. They're all sitting in amongst grasses and things. There's lots of greenery everywhere. Beautiful. And running across the front of your page. So I'm just using my mid green at the moment. Then I'm going to get my other green. So I've got 4 greens. And I'm just going to keep doing this kind of thing with those greens so that we start to create lovely depth. So that's the mid green. I'm going to put that down now and pick up my other mid green. So that's my grassy green that I picked up after I decided I needed it. Looking at the lush thickness of all these greens and which direction all the bits and bobs grow and things. So just looking at that and drawing in all these different lines and shapes of greens. Don't be afraid to go over the top of some of these flowers that we've put in the front. Again, I'm just going to touch up his stem. So those 2 that we worked on have their little stems that come down into the front or behind those little flowers that are in the front. And soon we'll put some buds in as well because they're important. It's telling us this is a big field of poppies and there's going to be lots more. A bit like my camellia tree at the moment. It's starting to bloom. It's beautiful. It's so full of buds. It's amazing. Okay. So see how that's now starting to thicken up a little bit. It's looking really lovely. Do some lovely swirly, soft shapes with your stems. Bent ones, there's lots of bent ones. I'm going to grab my darkest green now and just start to put a few lines in here and there to get some shadow happening and also to indicate the different shapes. And maybe you can use that to put some of your buds in as well. So just little dark spots or blobs, shapes that are attached to stems. Some are big, some are small. Just vary them a little bit. That's the secret. We just need to make sure we have all the elements in there, but you've got to make sure also that they're not all the same shape and you don't make patterns. So they've got to look a bit natural and random. So try not to make a fence out of them or have them all in a row. Try to put them in various places so that they look a bit more random. I'm doing these dark to start with, and then I'm going to come back over most of them and add a bit of my mid green or light, just to give them a little bit of tone, and noticing where some of these little buds sit up in here behind these flowers here. There's one just there that's got a nice little stem on it. There's a few here that kind of hang over. So just popping a few of those in. Also some darks through here. Get some shadow in your grasses. There we go. Wonderful. It's starting to look nice and thick. I know the dark buds are looking a bit too dark and a bit too obvious. They stick out a bit too much, but that's okay because we're going to soften them off a little bit with the other greens. I just wanted to define where they were first, and then we can come in now and work on those. So remembering the right side of the bud will be in shadow. So again, just coming in and making the left side the mid green, or the top, depending on the direction that it's in. Remember, your sun shines on the top left. So we're lightening up the top or the left side. See how that's kind of now not sticking out quite so much because we've got rid of some of the dark. Just going to put a few more grasses in while I'm here. Beautiful. And then I'll come in with my light green and add some highlights. I also want to put a bit of light purple here and there too, just to add some highlights to some of those little purple flowers again. So now it's time to sort of look around your painting. And if you haven't stepped away from it yet, pop up and have a look at it from a distance, because that'll give you a great view and a good idea of how you're going and what you might need to do next. So always assess your paintings. And that's why I like to stand up when I paint, because I step back all the time. It's just easier to see it from a distance when you do that. Okay. So just a few little highlights on my purple flowers, because we can't forget about those. They're all there. They're important too. So I've got to give them a bit of love. Okay, lovely. Not too much, just a suggestion here and there. Don't overdo it, because if you overdo it, then it loses its wow factor, doesn't it? A bit more dark here and there too. So we're just trying to thicken this up, making it look really lush and lovely. There we go. And what am I going to do next? Touch up some of these buds with my other green. This is that khaki sort of green that I grabbed at first. I actually really love this colour. It's really lovely. But as I mentioned, green is difficult. All right, I'm going to tip off some dust. It's annoying me now. Okay, lovely. And now it's time to look around at the picture. So looking at the picture, I need to add some more highlights. So you can see on these buds and on the edges of some of the stems and stalks, they've all got those tiny little furry hairs on them, and the hairs are catching the light. Now, in this instance, I don't know that we need to really do all the hairs. That's a bit much, isn't it? Because it's such a broad kind of picture. If it was just 1 or 2 poppies, then sure, you could. And if you feel like spending the rest of the day doing that, by all means, go ahead. But what I'm going to try to do, I'll show you here. I've got my lighter green. So this is not white or anything. It's just a light green. Just going to do a bit of a soft down through there like that, just to try and suggest some of these soft edges of the stems, because we don't want to put all the detail in. We'll be here for a month of Sundays, but we do need to highlight some of these spots. And the other thing I'll show you is on the buds, we need to highlight the tops of some of those too, because some of them are catching the light on the top. So use a very light green. If you don't have a very pale green, then maybe a pale creamy color or a pale yellow would be good. But don't go to white just yet. We'll save white for last. We might not even need white yet. I like to see what I can do without the white first. And don't forget to highlight the stems of the flowers that we've focused most on. So just a few little highlights like that. You can see how that really brings it to life. And it tells us where the light is, gives us some direction, and makes a whole lot of sense. So there's quite a lot of light through here, so you can just lighten up a few little bits of grass like this with the stems. Just do soft marks like that. We don't want too much of it, because it'll just saturate it then, and it won't look as bright in those few spots. So we don't want to overdo it. Just be careful, be prudent, don't go too crazy. And by doing that, by emphasizing the light on some of these, we're actually bringing them forward, because if we can see that information in that much detail, it means that they're closer to us, right? So that's why we're putting light on at the end, because we're bringing everything forward that has a little shine. So just run around your picture. Remember where the light's coming from. It's top left, so it's either on the top or the left of your what do you call them? Thingamajigs, buds, that's what it is. And just run your way around. A few little bits of grass. There's lots and lots of grasses that have caught the light. Going over some of your flowers and the flowers in the background, lightening up those ones. And even some of the grasses, they don't have light on the whole side of them. Might be just the top of them is catching a touch of light, or the tips, because they're poking up out of the shadows. So you can break up those little light areas as you go. Okay. Just making your way around the painting. Bits of light here and there. And that will bring everything forward. I feel like I need to do something else back here. Maybe there's more grass back there. I just want to see if I can make it look a bit more grassy and not so smooth in the green area at the back. Probably not, it's too late now. See what happens when you come in around things, you just lose all the definition. So I won't do that. But you could if you wish to. You could sort of just run a bit of a slightly darker green up around through there, which is why it's always good to get those backgrounds done first and be happy with them. Sometimes you don't know whether you are or not till you get to this point. Anyway, that's all good. So that's our beautiful poppies in a field painting. Do we need to add any more? Do we need to do more things in here? Probably we could be here for another half a day, tidying up and getting it all perfect. I do want to add a little bit of highlight to some of these petals and flowers. I'm using my cream just to get some shine on the edges of them to indicate that the sun's catching the edge, and just to lighten that up a tad. So we can just gently running around. You could use a very light yellow or a creamy color, something that's not white. As I said, I don't like white on red. It goes pink, unless you want pink, of course, then it's awesome. But we don't really want pink today. We want to try and keep this as red and as we can. Those beautiful reds. So this is a long way from finished. I would not call this anywhere near finished. If I was going to keep working on it, then it would need at least another, I don't know, 3 or 4 hours, I reckon, to get it completed. So if you've got the time, by all means go for it, because there's quite a lot of information in here that you could continue to work on and build on. So I look forward to seeing your paintings when they're done. And I don't know whether I'll get round to finishing this or not. I'll see how I go. Got some meetings and stuff this afternoon. So life's busy, isn't it? Oh, that's nice. So I've just put some of that cream in here. Remember, I just used light green to highlight some of these bits and bobs, but I think some little dashes of that creamy color, oh, that's a bit yummy, just really helps to, yes, add a bit of sunshine. So I'm just going to do a few more of those because I really like what that did. Come down through here. Yeah, the secret is try not to make patterns and try not to do the same shapes all the time. Keep it set sort of random. But that really brightens it up. That really sort of brings it alive, doesn't it? We could do with a lot more grass and buds and things through here. Definitely need some more buds, I think. Especially in here. Oh, that's not the right green. I'll try this one. Especially through here, there's quite a few in that area. And they're all kind of sitting in front of these beautiful purple flowers. So I can thicken that up with a few more buds. And dark green on the side to give it some shadow. So you don't need to put all the detail in for every part. It just seems to work as long as you get your lights and darks in the right spot. And you could do, put a bit more information onto some of the buds, maybe 2 or 3, just so we know what they are. And again, then that will tell us what all the other little blobs are. There's a lovely bright one just there in front of this flower. It's nice. It's got a lovely bright top on it. And then it's got a bit of a darker green underneath. It comes over like that. So you can just pick out a couple of things to highlight, and that will make sense then. You know what I mean? There's another one here. So don't be afraid of putting things. I wasn't putting anything in front of my main flowers, but they actually need it. Otherwise, they don't look like they fit in. Another little bud there. Go off into that area there. Yeah, good. And then over here, we've got a shine on the top of these guys. There's quite a lot of detail in the buds if you want to get into that. We've got little like stripes across the top, around the edges there, if you look closely. Okay, so we might wrap this up and I will leave you to continue on and see how you go with the rest of the day. Lovely. And when you're finished, don't forget to sign your artwork. Very important. I'm still not entirely happy. Oh, you're right. Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Let me come back and have a look at you. I'll stop recording now. So if you're watching this video, thanks for joining me. And please do send through your finished artwork. I'd love to see it. Have a great day.